Today we're going to be studying from Acts chapter 23. Paul has been arrested for a false accusation as he was going to take a vow and about to complete his vow. They saw him in the temple. They are falsely accusing him of bringing a Gentile into the temple, which was not true. And also they're saying that Paul is teaching the Jews that they should not follow the traditions of Moses or allow their children to be circumcised. And all that is false, but he's having to defend himself now. I'm going to actually start in 22 because it's kind of a weird starting place in chapter 23 verse 1. So I'm going to start in 22:30 and continue to read through 23. The commander wanted to find out exactly why Paul was being accused by the Jews, so the next day he released him and ordered the chief priests and all the members of the Sanhedrin to assemble. Then he brought Paul and had him stand before them. Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and said, "My brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day." At this, the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck." Those who were standing near Paul said, "How dare you insult God's high priest?" Paul replied, "Brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest, for it is written, 'Do not speak evil about the ruler of your people.'" That comes from Exodus 22, verse 28 that he's quoting. So this is something where Paul has been traveling a lot, and he's been in Turkey, a lot of areas very far away from Jerusalem. Last time we had heard, Caiaphas had been the high priest. So I think he was not aware that there was a new priest. It would have been somebody from the family of Aaron because it had to be through his genealogy. I don't know if Ananias is maybe a son of Caiaphas, but whatever has happened here, Paul was unaware that there was a new high priest. So when he said that, he knew he was obviously breaking the law once he realized who the high priest was. But this is showing the feisty side of Paul, that there's been times when he's been arrested where he gets indignant about how he's been treated. And I know that, many times he followed the example of Jesus where he turned the other cheek, he blessed his enemies, he was very kind. But every now and then his flesh has, I think we see a little bit of the side of Paul where he can get very defensive at times. And I think I'll just confess this for me, that when I get defensive with somebody, I can start being a lot more harsh with the way that I speak than I should be, because I started getting an attitude. And I kind of feel like this is what Paul was getting here. And he ended up, of course, repenting when he knew that he broke the law. And it's a question that I'd like for us to consider, though. Do we speak evil about our rulers? We don't always like our president. We might not always like our governor or the congressman. And speaking truth about how they're supporting policies that are wicked and stuff, I don't consider that to be evil. But when we start using, derogatory names for people, or when we're just harsh, like the way, calling this man a whitewashed wall, we don't have to call names, and I think this is something where we need to really be careful that even though it's coming from the Old Testament, we're still told in the New Testament to be respectful of our leaders and to pray for them. And so we have to be really careful that we're not guilty of something like this today, that we can sometimes let our flesh get out of control, and we need to repent when we do that. Verse 6. Then Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and the others Pharisees, called out in the Sanhedrin, "My brothers, I am a Pharisee, descended from Pharisees." Okay, I want to say why this is brilliant. He knows who his audience is right now. He sees that part of the audience are Pharisees, part of them are Sadducees. He knows if he focuses on this one part of his message of why he's saying he's being arrested, that it's going to cause a lot of arguing between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. This is why he is brilliant. He talks about the resurrection. The Pharisees believe in the resurrection. They believe everything Paul does about it. But he knows the Sadducees don't believe in a resurrection. They don't believe in spirits and angels. And so that's why he looks at his crowd and he says, aha, I know how to get this to go in a direction where I don't have to be so defensive of myself. So he says, he continues, he says, I stand on trial because of the hope of the resurrection of the dead. And that is part of his message that he was going around and teaching, but he's going to focus about that. That's why I was arrested, which, again, it was false accusations, but he knows, again, his crowd, and that if he focuses on this one thing, which is part of his message, he can have a distraction. Verse 7. When he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say there is no resurrection, and that there are neither angels nor spirits, but the Pharisees believe all these things. There was a great uproar, and some of the teachers of the law who were Pharisees stood up and argued vigorously. We find nothing wrong with this man, they said. So now they're actually defending Paul. And then they go on to say, what if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him? The dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. He ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him to the barracks. The following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome. Now, Jesus had appeared earlier and given him a message that he was supposed to go to Jerusalem. He was told that he would be bound, but that he would be defending himself before the Gentiles. Now, he didn't understand how that plan was going to unfold, from how he was going to get to Jerusalem and then somewhere he's going to go where there's Gentiles. Well, now he's been told by Jesus more clearly what the plan is. You're going to go to Rome. Those are the Gentiles that he's going to go to talk about Jesus. So now he understands more of the plan. Okay, verse 12. The next morning, some Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. Okay, so this plot is something where these over 40 men take this vow that they are not going to eat anything until they can kill Paul. We'll see how they go about trying to make this happen. Okay, verse 14. They went to the chief priests and the elders and said, we have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here. So as the commander would be transporting Paul to make more of a defense, these over 40 men would make sure that they kill Paul on the way to defend himself. But we'll see how God's got a plan, because obviously God's plans are not going to be thwarted by these evil men. So we'll see how God comes to his rescue. Verse 16. But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him. Okay, so here we learn that Paul has a sister. And I don't think it was by chance that his sister's son, which would be his nephew, just happened to be at the right place at the right time to hear this plot, that he's got wind of it and he wants to warn Paul that there's these people that are going to be doing this. They're going to ask for you to be brought to a certain place, and along the way they're going to try to kill you. Okay, so Paul is asking that this nephew of his be taken to this commander. Okay, verse 18. So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you, because he has something to tell you." The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and said, "What is it you want to tell me?" The way that this commander takes the nephew by the hand makes me think that this is a pretty young boy, that you wouldn't expect him to do that to somebody that was like, say, 20 years old or something, take him by the hand. And, this sounds like more like he was a younger boy, but I mean, we don't know for sure. It doesn't ever tell us the age of his sister's son, but it's interesting the way he pulls him aside like that by taking him by the hand. Okay, verse 20. He said, "Some Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting to ambush him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink." Now, I don't think we got that information the first time. Here it's saying eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request. The commander dismissed the young man with this warning: "Don't tell anyone what you have reported to me." Okay, so here we learn that these men, over 40 men, say that they're not going to eat or drink. So obviously, without water, you're going to die a lot quicker than if you don't have food. So I often wonder whatever happened to these men. Obviously, they would have had to break their vow if, they didn't want to die. So I guess probably they ended up breaking their vow, because we're going to see how God is going to, again, keep Paul safe with the commander's help. Okay, verse 23. Then the commander called 2 of his centurions and ordered them, "Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight." Okay, so he's going to help Paul escape at night. He's going to be kept under guard. There's a lot of soldiers, a lot of protection for Paul here. And he's going to be taken to Caesarea, which is quite a ways away. And that way the people in Jerusalem can't try to get him. Okay. So in verse 24, he says, "Provide horses for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix." So now we know why he's going to Caesarea. There's a governor there named Felix. Okay, verse 25. He wrote a letter as follows: "Claudius Lysias." Now, this is the name of the commander. His name is Claudius Lysias. So he's putting his name first, and then he's going to be putting his greeting next. "Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him, but I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he is a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. I found that the accusation had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him." Verse 31. "So the soldiers, carrying out their orders, took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day they let the cavalry go on without him. The next day they let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to the barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Cilicia, he said, 'I will hear your case when your accusers get here.' Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace." Okay, so now these people who wanted to have this plot and have Paul brought to them are now being told they have to come to Governor Felix. So we're going to see how everything unfolds when he comes before the trial in chapter 24.